In the stark heart of Texas, where fates were often carved from dust and grit, Samuel McKinnon's life seemed destined for quiet solitude and deep disappointment. Yet, at a moment when all hope felt lost, a mysterious 14-year-old girl entered his world. With just $50 and eyes that held countless untold stories, she promised not only to alter the course of a struggling ranch but also to rekindle the embers of a fading spirit. What unfolded after that fateful encounter? And how could a discarded child possibly become the cornerstone of such an enduring legacy? Listen closely as her journey began to reshape everything. The final gavel's echo from the child labor auction in Galveston slowly faded. Amidst the milling crowd, Samuel McKinnon, a seasoned rancher, spotted her. Frail, just 14 years old, her eyes held sorrows deeper than the Texas night. McKinnon, at 42, knew the weight of loneliness well. His sprawling cattle ranch in Brazos County was prosperous, built over 2 decades of hard toil. But such an achievement felt hollow, having no one to share it with. His marriage to Martha, his wife who had yearned for a child for 15 years with no success, had withered with each failed attempt. The ranch hands whispered behind his back, what good was a man who couldn't even father an heir? McKinnon stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the girl. He had paid $50, a substantial sum, far more than many of the children here would earn in 2 years of labor. He couldn't have known then that this fragile child, seemingly broken, would become the very key to salvaging his failing ranch, mending his barren marriage, and redeeming his own tormented spirit. What happened next would truly shake the foundations of the Wild West. The year 1887 had been particularly harsh on Texas. Desperate poverty had pushed many families to dire measures, forcing them to send their children away. Some sold their young ones to factories, others to farms, all clinging to the faint hope that their offspring might find better lives than the destitution that had claimed their own. Samuel stood at the rear of the crowded warehouse, his calloused hands gripping his hat, quietly observing the sorrowful procession of children being sold like livestock. The auctioneer's voice cut through his thoughts. Next, we have a girl. Age 14, healthy and strong. She's worked in the cotton field since she was 8. Good with animals, can read and write a bit. Samuel looked up. A thin girl was pushed onto the makeshift platform. Tangled brown hair partly obscured a face that might have been pretty, were it not for the hollow cheeks and dark circles beneath her eyes. Her dress was little more than rags, patched and repatched so many times that the original fabric was barely discernible, but it was her eyes that truly captured him. They didn't hold the vacant stare he'd witnessed in the other children. These eyes burned with a fierce intelligence, darting around the room as if calculating every exit, every face, every possible outcome. Bidding starts at $20. The auctioneer called out, $25. Shouted a man near the front. Samuel recognized him, Thomas Briggs, a small farmer north of town, known for working his help almost to death. $30, came another voice. Samuel found himself stepping forward, before he'd even made a conscious decision. $50, the warehouse fell silent. $50 was more than most of these children would earn in 2 years of hard labor. The auctioneer's eyes gleamed with avarice. $50 from the gentleman in back, do I hear 60? The silence stretched. No one was foolish enough to bid against Samuel McKinnon once he'd made up his mind. Sold to Mr. McKinnon for $50. As Samuel made his way to the front to complete the transaction, he caught the girl's eye. Instead of the gratitude or fear he expected, he saw something that made him pause. Pity. This child, who had just been sold like a piece of property, was looking at him with pity. The auctioneer handed him a piece of paper with the girl's details. Name's Rebecca Sullivan. Parents died of fever last winter. She's been living rough since then. You got yourself a good worker there, Mr. McKinnon. Samuel folded the paper and approached the girl. Up close, he could see she was even thinner than she'd appeared on the platform. Her wrists were like twigs, and her shoes had holes that let her toes peek through. "Miss Sullivan," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "I'm Samuel McKinnon. You'll be coming to work on my ranch." She studied his face for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was soft but clear. "What kind of work?" "General help around the house and grounds. My wife, Martha, will explain your duties. And if I don't want to come?" The question surprised him. Most of the children he'd seen that day had accepted their fate with resigned silence. "You have a choice in the matter," he said. "But winter's coming, and the streets of Galveston ain't kind to young folks on their own." Rebecca looked around the warehouse, at the remaining children still waiting to be sold, at the men with hungry eyes counting their coins. When she looked back at Samuel, something in her expression had shifted. "I reckon I'll come with you then, Mr. McKinnon." The wagon ride to the McKinnon ranch took most of the day. Samuel had brought his wagon, laden with supplies from town, and Rebecca sat beside him on the bench seat as they traversed the dusty roads through the East Texas countryside. She didn't speak much during the journey, but Samuel caught her observing everything: the way he handled the horses, the landmarks they passed, the sun's position. This wasn't a child simply along for the ride. She was committing every detail of the route to memory. "Are you planning to run off?" he asked after they'd been traveling for several hours. "Depends," she replied without looking at him. "On what?" "On whether you bought me to work or for other reasons." The quiet steel in her voice made Samuel's stomach clench. He pulled the wagon to a halt and turned to face her fully. "Miss Sullivan, I want to be clear about something. You're coming to my ranch to help with honest work, cooking, cleaning, tending the animals, nothing more. Any man who would harm a child deserves to be strung up, and I include myself in that judgment." She studied his face again with those unnervingly mature eyes. Finally, she nodded. "All right then." They rode in more comfortable silence after that. As the sun began to set, they crested a hill and Rebecca got her first look at the McKinnon ranch. It sprawled across the valley below them like a small town. The main house was built of sturdy timber with a wraparound porch and dormer windows. A large barn stood to one side, with several smaller outbuildings scattered around the property. Cattle dotted the pastures that stretched as far as the eye could see. "It's bigger than I expected," Rebecca said softly. "Took me 20 years to build it up," Samuel replied with quiet pride. "Of course, it'll all belong to strangers when I'm gone, seeing as Martha and I haven't been blessed with children." Something flickered across Rebecca's face at those words, but she said nothing as they pulled up to the main house. A woman emerged onto the porch. Martha McKinnon was still handsome at 38, with blonde hair only lightly touched with gray, and a figure that spoke of good living. But there was a tightness around her eyes that suggested years of disappointment. "Samuel," she called as he climbed down from the wagon, "you're later than I expected." "Had some business in town," he replied, then turned to help Rebecca down. "Martha, this is Rebecca Sullivan. She'll be helping around the house." Martha's eyes widened as she took in the girl's ragged appearance. "My lord, child. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in months." "Probably hasn't," Samuel said. "I was thinking she could have the small room off the kitchen." "Nonsense," Martha said briskly. "She'll have the spare bedroom upstairs. Come along, dear. Let's get you cleaned up and fed." As Martha led Rebecca into the house, Samuel watched from the porch. He'd expected his wife to be pleased with the help, but there was something almost desperate in the way she'd taken charge of the girl. Inside, Martha was already bustling around the kitchen, heating water and pulling food from the pantry. "Sit down, Rebecca. That is your name, isn't it? Such a pretty name. I had a sister named Rebecca once." Rebecca perched on the edge of a chair, her eyes taking in the warm kitchen with its polished wood surfaces and cheerful curtains. "It's very nice here, Mrs. McKinnon," she said. "Oh, call me Martha, dear." We're not formal folk." Martha set a plate of bread and cold meat in front of her. "Now, eat up while I prepare a bath for you." As Rebecca ate, slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, Martha chattered about the house, the ranch, the nearby town. But Samuel, watching from the doorway, noticed how his wife's hands shook slightly as she worked, and how her voice had a brittle quality he hadn't heard in years. When Rebecca had finished eating, Martha led her upstairs to the spare bedroom. It was simply furnished but clean and comfortable, with a window that looked out over the ranch grounds. "This will be your room," Martha said, smoothing the quilt on the bed. "I'll bring you some proper clothes tomorrow. I think I have some things that might fit." "Thank you," Rebecca said. "I'm not used to such kindness." Martha's face crumpled for just a moment before she composed herself. "Every child deserves kindness, dear. Now let's get you that bath." The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Rebecca proved to be everything the auctioneer had promised, and more. She was up before dawn, helping Martha with breakfast for the ranch hands. She tended the vegetable garden with a skill that suggested years of experience. She could mend clothes, churn butter, and even help with the animals when needed. But it was her effect on Martha that Samuel found most remarkable. His wife, who had grown increasingly withdrawn over the years of failed pregnancies, seemed to come alive again. She spent hours teaching Rebecca to cook special dishes, showing her how to arrange flowers from the garden, even reading to her in the evenings. "She's a bright girl," Martha told Samuel one evening as they sat on the porch. "She learns everything so quickly." "Maybe too quickly," Samuel replied, watching Rebecca in the distance as she helped one of the ranch hands doctor a lame horse. "Sometimes I get the feeling she's older than her years. She's had to grow up fast, poor thing, but she's safe now." Samuel nodded, but something nagged at him. Rebecca worked hard and caused no trouble, but there were moments when he caught her watching the horizon with a calculating expression, or noticed how she always seemed to know exactly where everyone was at any given time. One evening in October, he found Rebecca in the barn after supper, sitting in the hayloft and staring out at the darkening sky. He climbed up to join her. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. She glanced at him, then back at the sky. "I was thinking about my parents. The auctioneer said they died of fever." "They did, but before that, they had dreams. Pa wanted to start his own farm someday. Ma wanted to learn to play the piano." She was quiet for a moment. "I wonder if I'll ever have dreams like that." "What kind of dreams would you have?" he asked. She considered the question seriously. "I think I'd like to learn to read better. Real books, not just the Bible or almanac. And maybe learn about numbers. Not just counting, but the kind of arithmetic that helps you figure out important things." Samuel was intrigued. What kind of important things? Like how much cattle a ranch can support. How to tell if you're making money or losing it. How to plan for bad years. She looked at him directly. How to make sure you never have to sell your children. The words hit him like a physical blow. In all his years of running the ranch, he'd never talked to anyone, not even Martha, about the financial side of the operation. Yet this 14-year-old girl had somehow grasped that this knowledge was power. "I could teach you," he found himself saying. "If you're truly interested." Her eyes lit up. "You would?" "Reading, writing, arithmetic, the basics of running a ranch. But it would be in addition to your regular work, not instead of it." "I understand." And so began Rebecca's education. After the evening chores were done, she would join Samuel in his study, where he taught her to read from his collection of books and showed her how to work with numbers. She absorbed everything, with a hunger that amazed him. Martha was delighted with the arrangement. "It's wonderful to see her learning," she told Samuel. "Every girl should have an education." But as autumn turned to winter, Samuel began to notice changes in both his wife and Rebecca. Martha had always been particular about Rebecca's appearance, but now she seemed almost obsessive about it. She ordered new dresses from town, spent hours brushing and arranging Rebecca's hair, and insisted on teaching her what she called proper manners. Rebecca submitted to all this attention with good grace, but Samuel sometimes caught her looking in the mirror with an expression that was hard to read. The first real test came in November, when a late-season storm brought 3 days of freezing. Rain and wind. The ranch hands worked around the clock to bring the cattle to shelter and secure the buildings, while Martha and Rebecca kept hot food and coffee flowing. On the second night, one of the newer hands, a young man named Jake Winters, cornered Rebecca in the kitchen while Martha was upstairs and Samuel was in the barn. "You're growing up real pretty," Jake said, moving closer than was proper. "Bet you're lonely sometimes stuck out here with just old folks for company." Rebecca stepped back, but Jake followed. "Come on now, don't be shy. I could show you some fun. I think you should go back to the bunkhouse," Rebecca said quietly. "Not until I get what I came for," Jake replied, reaching for her. He never saw the cast iron skillet coming. Rebecca's swing caught him square in the temple, dropping him to the kitchen floor like a sack of grain. He wasn't unconscious, but he was definitely seeing stars. "I said, go back to the bunkhouse," Rebecca repeated. Still holding the skillet. Jake struggled to his feet, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "You little hellcat. You could have killed me." "Could have, didn't. Won't be so careful next time." Samuel's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What's going on here?" He stood in the kitchen doorway, taking in the scene. Jake holding his bleeding head, Rebecca with the skillet, the determination in her eyes. Jake started to bluster. "Mr. McKinnon, this girl attacked me. I know exactly what you were doing," Samuel said coldly. "Pack your gear. You're off this ranch tonight." "But Mr. McKinnon, it's storming out there." "Should have thought of that before you decided to bother a child under my protection." Samuel's hand rested on the gun at his hip. "You've got 10 minutes to clear out, or I'll drag you out myself." Jake looked from Samuel to Rebecca, saw no mercy in either face, and stumbled toward the door. "This ain't over," he muttered. "Yes, it is," Samuel replied. After Jake had gone, Samuel turned to Rebecca. "You all right?" She nodded, setting down the skillet. "I'm sorry about the trouble." "You have nothing to apologize for. You defended yourself, and you showed more restraint than I would have." He studied her face. "Where did you learn to handle yourself like that?" "Living on the streets teaches you things," she said simply. Martha appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. When she heard what had happened, her face went pale with fury. "That animal," she said. "Thank God you're safe, Rebecca." But Samuel noticed how Martha's hands shook as she fussed over the girl, and how her eyes kept darting to the windows as if expecting more threats to appear. That night, after Rebecca had gone to bed, Martha came to Samuel's study, where he was working on the ranch accounts. "We need to talk," she said. Samuel looked up from his ledgers. "About what?" "About what happened tonight. About Rebecca." Martha sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk. "Samuel, we can't keep pretending she's just a hired girl." "What do you mean? Look at her. Really look at her. She's turning into a beautiful young woman, and we're two childless people who've grown far too attached." Martha's voice broke slightly. "What happens when she decides to leave? What happens when some young man comes courting?" Samuel sat down his pen. He'd been trying not to think about these very questions. "She's only been here a few months, Martha. And in those few months, she's become the daughter we never had. Don't tell me you don't see it too." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we make it official. We could adopt her. Martha, she's not an orphan. She was sold into labor by whom? The county. She has no family left, and she's clearly happy here." Martha leaned forward. "Samuel, this could be our chance." The chance we've prayed for all these years. Samuel understood his wife's desperation, but something about the idea troubled him. We should ask Rebecca what she wants. Of course. But think about it. She'd have a real home, a real family. She'd inherit the ranch someday. Isn't that better than whatever uncertain future awaits her otherwise? That night, Samuel lay awake thinking about Martha's words. He'd grown fond of Rebecca, there was no denying it. She was bright, capable, and showed more understanding of ranch operations than any of his hired hands. But was Martha's plan fair to the girl? The answer came sooner than expected. 2 days later, while Rebecca was helping Samuel with the ranch books, she suddenly looked up from the ledger she was studying. "Mr. McKinnon, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Mrs. McKinnon wants to adopt me, doesn't she?" Samuel's pen froze over the page. "What makes you say that?" "Little things. The way she talks about the future, the clothes she's been buying me, how she introduces me to people in town." Rebecca closed the ledger carefully. "She's a kind woman, and I'm grateful for everything you've both done. But I need you to know something." "What's that?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "I wasn't entirely truthful about my circumstances when you bought me." Samuel set down his pen. "Go on." "My parents did die of fever. That part was true. But I wasn't just living rough on the streets afterward." She met his eyes. "I was working for a man named Garrett Mills. He ran certain kinds of businesses in Galveston." Samuel's blood ran cold. He'd heard of Mills, a man who controlled most of the illegal activities in the port city. "What kind of work?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Nothing like what you're thinking," Rebecca said quickly. "I was too young for that. But I kept his books, carried messages, watched for trouble. I was good with numbers, and I could move around the city without attracting attention." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Mrs. McKinnon deserves to know what kind of person she wants to adopt. And because," Rebecca hesitated, "because I think someone's been watching the ranch." Samuel's hand instinctively moved toward his gun. "What do you mean?" "Yesterday, when I was working in the garden, I saw sunlight reflecting off something in the hills to the east, like someone was using a spyglass. And 2 days ago, I found horse tracks near the creek that don't match any of your horses. You think Mills sent someone after you? Maybe, or maybe it's someone else entirely. But I learned a long time ago to pay attention when things don't feel right." Samuel stood up and walked to the window, scanning the hills Rebecca had mentioned. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I hoped I was wrong. And because I was afraid you'd send me away if you knew the truth about my past." Samuel turned back to her. "Rebecca, what you did to survive doesn't define who you are. But this Mills character, is he likely to come after you?" "I don't know. I never stole from him, never betrayed him. But he doesn't like loose ends." That evening, Samuel called his foreman, Tom Bradley, into his study. Tom had been with the ranch for 10 years and was one of the few men Samuel trusted completely. "I need you to set up a watch rotation," Samuel said. "Someone's been scouting the ranch." Tom's weathered face grew serious. "You think we're going to have trouble?" "I think we need to be prepared for it." As Tom left to organize the men, Samuel found Martha in the kitchen preparing supper. He told her about his conversation with Rebecca, watching his wife's face carefully as he spoke. Martha listened in silence, her hands never pausing in their work. When he finished, she set down her wooden spoon and turned to face him. "Does this change how you feel about her?" she asked. "No, if anything, it makes me respect her more. She survived things that would have broken most adults." "Then it doesn't change how I feel either." Martha's voice was firm. "That child has been through enough. If trouble's coming, we'll face it together." Samuel felt a surge of love for his wife. Despite her desperate desire for a child, Martha's first concern was Rebecca's welfare. "There's something else," he said. I don't think we should push the adoption idea right now. Rebecca needs to know she has choices, not feel like she's being passed from one owner to another. Martha's face fell slightly, but she nodded. You're right. But Samuel, I need you to know that girl has brought something back to life in me that I thought was dead forever. I know she's done the same for me. The attack came 3 nights later, just before dawn. Rebecca, who had taken to sleeping lightly, heard the horses before anyone else. She slipped from her bed and peered out her window to see 6 men riding hard toward the ranch house. She ran to Samuel and Martha's room, pounding on the door. Mr. McKinnon, riders coming fast. Samuel was up instantly, grabbing his rifle from beside the bed. How many? 6 that I could see. Martha was already pulling on her robe. Is it Mills? I don't know, but we need to get ready. Samuel sent Martha to wake the ranch hands while he and Rebecca took positions at the front windows. In the gray, pre-dawn light, they could see the riders spreading out to surround the house. Rebecca, Samuel said quietly, there's a shotgun in the kitchen pantry. You know how to use one? Yes, sir. Good. Watch the back door. As Rebecca moved to the kitchen, she caught sight of the lead rider's face in the growing light. Her stomach clenched with recognition. It was Jake Winters, the hand Samuel had fired, and behind him rode several men she recognized from her time in Galveston. The attack began with a shout from Jake, McKinnon. Send out the girl, and nobody gets hurt. Samuel's voice rang out from the front window. You're trespassing on my land. Clear out while you still can. This ain't about you, old man. It's about the girl. She stole something that belongs to my employer. Rebecca felt a chill of fear. She had taken something from Mills before she left Galveston, a small ledger that contained records of his payments to various city officials. She'd thought of it as insurance, something to keep her safe if Mills ever came after her. But apparently, he wanted it back badly enough to send men across half of Texas. The first shots came from the east side of the house, where 2 of Mills's men were trying to force their way into the barn. Tom Bradley and another ranch hand returned fire from the barn loft, and the attackers fell back. Rebecca heard glass breaking in the front room and knew someone was trying to get in through a window. She left her position at the back door and crept toward the sound, shotgun ready. She found one of Mills's men halfway through the parlor window, struggling to get his legs inside. Rebecca didn't hesitate. She fired once, and the man tumbled back outside with a scream. Rebecca, Martha's voice came from upstairs. Are you all right? Fine. Rebecca called back, reloading the shotgun. The battle continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Samuel and his men had the advantage of defensive positions, but Mills's men were well armed and determined. Finally, Jake's voice cut through the gunfire. McKinnon. I'm coming in under a white flag. I want to talk. Samuel considered for a moment, then called back. Come ahead, but keep your hands where I can see them. Jake approached the front porch with his hands raised, though Rebecca noticed he was careful to stay behind cover. McKinnon, this is simple. Send out the girl and we'll ride away. What makes you think I'd turn over a child to a scum like you? Because if you don't, we'll burn you out. We've got the numbers and the firepower. Samuel was about to respond when Rebecca stepped onto the porch, her shotgun cradled in her arms. Jake, the young man's face twisted with anger and desire. There you are, pretty girl. You caused me a lot of trouble. You caused your own trouble. Rebecca's voice was steady. What does Mills really want? You know what he wants, that little book you took when you ran off. Samuel looked at Rebecca in surprise, but she kept her eyes on Jake. And if I give it to him, then you're free to go. Mills doesn't want you. He's got plenty of girls. He just wants his property back. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, thinking. The ledger was hidden in her bedroom, sewn into the lining of her old dress, the one she'd been wearing when Samuel bought her. She'd kept it as insurance, but now it seemed like it might be the key to everyone's safety. "All right," she said finally, "but I want something in return." Jake grinned. "You ain't in a position to bargain, girl, aren't I?" Rebecca gestured around the ranch. "You're outnumbered and surrounded. Mr. McKinnon's men are good shots, and they know this land better than you do. You might take us down, but it'll cost you." Samuel stepped up beside her. "The girl's right. You want to start a war over a book?" Jake's confidence wavered slightly. "What do you want?" "A guarantee," Rebecca said. "I give you the book. You and your men ride away and never come back. And you tell Mills that I'm dead, killed in the attack. That way he has no reason to send anyone else after me." "And what makes you think Mills will believe that?" Rebecca smiled grimly. "Because you're going to bring him a piece of my dress with blood on it as proof." The negotiation took another 10 minutes, but eventually Jake agreed. Rebecca went upstairs and retrieved the ledger from its hiding place, then cut a strip of fabric from her old dress and stained it with blood from a cut on her hand. As Jake and his men prepared to leave, he looked back at Rebecca with a mixture of anger and regret. "You could have had an easy life in the city, girl. Why'd you choose this?" Rebecca looked around at the ranch, at Samuel standing protectively beside her, at Martha watching from the window, at the ranch hands who had risked their lives to defend her. "Because this is home." In the weeks that followed the attack, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Samuel hired additional security and had Tom Bradley teach all the household members, including Martha and Rebecca, advanced shooting techniques. But more importantly, the crisis had clarified something for all of them. One evening in December, as they sat around the fireplace after supper, Martha broached the subject that had been on all their minds. "Rebecca, dear, we need to discuss your future." Rebecca looked up from the book she was reading, one of Samuel's treatises on cattle breeding. "About what?" "Well, you're not a child anymore, and you're certainly not a servant." Martha exchanged a look with Samuel. "We were wondering how you'd feel about becoming a true member of this family." "You mean adoption?" "If that's what you want," Samuel said. "But we want you to understand what that would mean. You'd inherit the ranch someday. You'd have a say in how it's run. But you'd also have responsibilities to the land, to the people who work it, to the community." Rebecca closed her book and considered their words. Over the past few months, she'd learned more about running a ranch than she'd ever expected. Samuel had taught her to read market reports, calculate feed costs, and plan for seasonal changes. She discovered she had a gift for managing both livestock and people. "Can I ask you something?" she finally said. "Of course. Why did you really buy me that day in Galveston?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I saw something in your eyes that reminded me of myself at that age. A determination to survive no matter what. I respected that. And I saw a child who deserved better than what life had given her." Martha added, "I wanted to help." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Then yes, I'd like to be adopted. But I want to earn my place here, not just be given it." "What do you mean?" Samuel asked. "I want to learn everything about running this ranch. I want to prove I can make it profitable and keep it growing. And I want to help other children like I was kids who need a chance." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my dear girl." "There's something else," Rebecca continued. "I've been thinking about what happened with Mills's men. There are probably other children trapped in situations like I was. Maybe we could do something about that." Samuel leaned forward, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" "What if we started small, maybe taking in 1 or 2 children a year who need homes? We could teach them useful skills, give them an education, help them build better lives." "That's a wonderful idea," Martha said immediately. "We have plenty of room, and Lord knows we could use more help." Samuel was more cautious. "It would be expensive, and we'd need to be careful about who we take in." "I could help with that," Rebecca said. I know how to spot children who are worth saving and how to avoid the ones who might cause trouble. They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming. By the time they went to bed, they had outlined a vision that would make the McKinnon Ranch not just a cattle operation, but a place of refuge and opportunity. 5 years later, in the spring of 1892, Rebecca McKinnon stood on the front porch of the ranch house, watching a wagon approach from town. She was 19 now, a striking young woman with the confidence that came from knowing her place in the world. The wagon was driven by Tom Bradley, and beside him sat a thin boy of about 12 with suspicious eyes and clothes that had seen better days. In the back of the wagon were 2 other children, a girl of 8 and another boy who couldn't have been more than 10. "More strays from the city?" Samuel asked, joining Rebecca on the porch. "The Children's Aid Society sent word they were coming," Rebecca replied. "The boy's name is Marcus. His parents died in a factory fire. The girl is Anna. Her mother abandoned her at a church. And the little one is Billy. He was living on the streets." Samuel nodded. Over the past 5 years, they had taken in 15 children. Some had stayed and become part of the ranch family. Others had moved on to establish their own lives. But all had left with skills and education that gave them real opportunities. The ranch had prospered too. Rebecca's insights into cattle management and her careful attention to finances had increased their profits by 30%. She'd also established relationships with buyers in Kansas City and Chicago that gave them better prices for their beef. Martha appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. At 43, she looked younger than she had 5 years ago, despite the gray in her hair. Having children to care for, even temporarily, had given her a purpose that years of failed pregnancies had never provided. "Are they hungry?" she asked, which was always her first question about new arrivals. "Most likely," Rebecca replied. "Tom said they've been traveling for 3 days." As the wagon pulled up, Rebecca walked down to greet the new arrivals. The boy Marcus looked at her with the same calculating expression she remembered having. At his age, "You're Rebecca McKinnon?" he asked. "I am." "And you're Marcus Thompson?" "Maybe. Depends on what you want from me." Rebecca smiled. "Right now I want you to come inside and get something to eat. After that, we'll talk about what happens next. And if I don't want to stay, then you don't stay. But before you decide, let me show you something." She led him to the barn, where several of the older children who had become permanent residents were working with the horses. One of them, a young man of 18 named David, looked up from the horse he was shoeing. "New arrivals?" he asked Marcus. "Anna and Billy," Rebecca replied. "David, why don't you tell Marcus about your first week here?" David grinned. "I spent most of it planning ways to run off. Figured these folks were just another kind of trap." "What changed your mind?" Marcus asked. "They kept their word about everything. Said I could leave any time, and they meant it. Said they'd teach me useful skills, and they did. Said they'd treat me fair, and they have." David returned to his work on the horse's hoof. "Been here 4 years now. Next month, I'm starting my own blacksmithing business in town." Marcus looked around the barn, taking in the well-maintained equipment and healthy animals. "And they don't make you do anything improper?" "Never," David said firmly. "Mr. and Mrs. McKinnon are good people. So is Rebecca. They saved my life." That evening, after the new children had been fed and settled into the bunkhouse where the temporary residents lived, Rebecca sat in Samuel's study, working on the ranch accounts. He looked up from his correspondence. "You realize what we've built here, don't you?" he said. "A cattle ranch. More than that. We've created something that will outlast all of us. These children we've helped, they'll go on to help others. The skills they've learned, the values they've absorbed, they'll pass those on." Rebecca set down her pen. "Do you ever regret buying me that day in Galveston?" Samuel considered the question seriously. Not for a moment. Best $50 I ever spent. But I have to ask you the same thing. Do you ever regret coming with me? Never. Rebecca's voice was firm. You and Martha gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. The chance to be part of a real family. And now you're giving that same chance to others. Rebecca nodded, then looked out the window at the bunkhouse where the new children were settling in for their first night. Samuel, there's something I've been thinking about. What's that? I'm 19 now, old enough to marry if I wanted to, but I keep thinking about all the children out there who need help, and all the work we still have to do here. She paused. What if this is my calling? What if instead of having children of my own, I'm meant to help the ones who have no one else? Samuel studied her face carefully. That's a big decision, Rebecca. Are you sure you're not just afraid of leaving what's familiar? Maybe a little, she admitted. But mostly, I feel like this is where I belong. This ranch, this work, this family we've built, it feels right. Then that's enough for me, Samuel said. But remember, you're still young. You might change your mind someday. And if I do, I know you and Martha will support whatever decision I make. Always. The real test of everything they'd built came in the summer of 1893 when a severe drought struck Texas. Cattle were dying across the state, and many ranchers were facing bankruptcy. Samuel called a meeting of all the ranch residents, permanent and temporary, to discuss their situation. I won't lie to you, he said, addressing the group gathered in the main barn. This is the worst drought I've seen in 20 years. We're going to have to make some hard choices. Marcus, who had been at the ranch for a year and had become one of its most dedicated residents, raised his hand. What kind of choices? Rebecca answered. We might have to sell some of the cattle early, before they lose too much weight, and we'll need to find new water sources for the ones we keep. What about us? Asked Sarah, a 15-year-old girl who had arrived 6 months earlier. Will you have to send us away? Martha, who had been quiet until now, spoke up firmly. Absolutely not. This family sticks together, no matter what. David stepped forward. Mrs. McKinnon, Rebecca, Mr. McKinnon, you've all done so much for us. Now it's our turn to help. We can work longer hours, take on extra responsibilities, whatever you need. Murmurs of agreement came from around the group. Even the newest arrivals nodded their willingness to help. Over the following months, the ranch family pulled together in ways that amazed even Samuel. The older children took on adult responsibilities without complaint. Marcus revealed a talent for finding water sources and helped dig 2 new wells. Sarah organized the younger children into efficient work crews. Anna, despite being only 9, proved to have a gift for caring for sick animals. But it was Rebecca who truly stepped up as a leader. She negotiated deals with cattle buyers, managed the ranch's dwindling finances with careful precision, and somehow kept everyone's spirits up, even when things looked darkest. One evening in August, as they sat on the porch after another scorching day, Martha took Rebecca's hand. I need to tell you something, she said. When Samuel first brought you home, I thought I wanted a daughter. But what I got was so much more than that. What do you mean? I got a partner, someone who could carry on what we've built here. Long after Samuel and I are gone. Martha's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You've become the heart of this place, Rebecca. These children look up to you, not because they have to, but because they want to. Rebecca squeezed her adopted mother's hand. I learned from the best. Samuel, who had been listening quietly, cleared his throat. There's something Martha and I have been discussing, and we think it's time to make it official. What's that? We want to make you a full partner in the ranch. Equal shares in everything. The land, the cattle, the profits, the decisions. Rebecca's eyes widened. Samuel, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Martha urged. You've earned it 10 times over. But what about when you have children? Of your own someday? Samuel and Martha exchanged a look. Rebecca, Martha said gently, You are our child. And all these other children we've helped raise, they're our legacy too. This ranch isn't just about blood family anymore. It's about chosen family." Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I accept." 10 years later, in 1903, the McKinnon Ranch had become legendary throughout Texas. What had started as a desperate attempt by a childless couple to find purpose had grown into something far greater. Rebecca, now 29, stood before a crowd of dignitaries from Austin who had come to witness what newspapers were calling the McKinnon miracle. Over the past 15 years, the ranch had taken in more than 60 children. Most had gone on to successful lives as teachers, business owners, skilled craftsmen, and even a few who had started their own ranches, using the knowledge they'd gained here. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rebecca addressed the crowd, "what you see here isn't the result of any one person's vision. It's what happens when you give children what they need most, not just food and shelter, but education, opportunity, and the knowledge that someone believes in them." Governor Joseph Sears himself was present, along with representatives from the Children's Aid Society and several wealthy philanthropists who were interested in funding similar operations. "Miss McKinnon," the governor said, "or should I say, Mrs. McKinnon?" He gestured to the wedding ring Rebecca now wore. "It's Mrs. Harrison now, actually," Rebecca replied with a smile. She had married James Bradley, Tom Bradley's younger brother, the year before, though she had kept her pivotal role in managing the ranch. "But the work continues regardless of my name." The governor nodded. "Tell us about your success rate." "We understand that over 90% of the children who've lived here have gone on to productive, law-abiding lives." "That's correct," Rebecca said. "But I think the real measure of success is different." Rebecca gestured to the crowd. Around them, many of whom were former residents of the ranch who had returned for this special day. "The real success is that these young people learned they had value, that they could make choices about their lives, and that they had the power to help others in turn." Marcus Thompson, now 22 and the owner of a successful freight business, stepped forward. "Governor, I was 12 when I came here, angry, suspicious, sure that every adult was trying to cheat me somehow. Mrs. Harrison, Rebecca, she didn't try to change me overnight. She just showed me that there was another way to live." Sarah Martinez, who had become a school teacher, added, "They taught us that our past didn't have to define our future. But more than that, they showed us how to give back." The governor was clearly impressed. "And this model could be replicated elsewhere?" Samuel, now 58 but still vigorous, answered, "We believe so. But it requires more than just money. It requires people who are committed to seeing each child as an individual, not just another mouth to feed. The key," Martha added, "is treating them as family members, not charity cases." As the day's festivities continued, Rebecca found herself standing apart from the crowd, looking out over the ranch that had become her life's work. James came up beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. "Proud of what you've built?" he asked. "Proud of what we've all built together," she corrected. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Samuel hadn't been at that auction in Galveston. But he was, and you were brave enough to trust him." Rebecca nodded, then looked at the group of current residents who were helping serve refreshments to the visitors. Among them were 2 new arrivals, siblings who had been orphaned when their parents died in a mining accident. "Do you think we're making a real difference?" she asked her husband. "Look around," James replied. 63 children who have better lives because of this place. Some of them now helping other children in turn. If that's not making a difference, I don't know what is. That evening, after all the visitors had gone, the ranch family gathered for their traditional Sunday dinner. The big dining room was full current residents, some who had stayed on as permanent family members, and several who had returned for the celebration. Samuel stood to address the group, as he had done countless times over the years, but this time his words carried special weight. 18 years ago, he began, I bought a 14-year-old girl at a labor auction because something in her eyes told me she deserved better. I thought I was saving her, but it turned out she was saving me and Martha and all of us. He looked around the table at the faces gathered there, young and old, newcomers and veterans, all part of the family. They had chosen to create. What Rebecca built here proved something important, that family isn't just about blood. It's about commitment, about choosing to care for each other, about passing on the best of what we've learned. Rebecca stood as well. And it proves that no child is too damaged, too angry, or too lost to be saved. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to see their potential instead of their problems. Marcus raised his glass to the McKinnon Ranch, to chosen family, and to second chances, to second chances. The group CHORUSED. 20-5 years after that first meeting in Galveston, Rebecca sat in the same study where Samuel had first taught her to read financial reports. Now it was she who was teaching, this time to Alina, a sharp-eyed 13-year-old who had arrived 6 months earlier. So if we sell the cattle in Kansas City instead of Fort Worth, we make how much more per head? Rebecca asked. Alina studied the figures carefully. About $3.50. But we have to factor in the extra shipping costs. Exactly. And what does that tell us about timing? That we need to watch the market reports and ship when the price difference is big enough to cover the extra costs and still make a profit. Rebecca smiled. You're learning fast, Mrs. Harrison. Alina looked up from the ledger. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you do all this? Take in kids like me, I mean. You could have an easier life without us. Rebecca considered the question, the same one she'd asked Samuel all those years ago. Because someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. And because I learned that the best way to honor that gift is to pass it on. Alina nodded thoughtfully. Do you think I could learn to run a place like this someday? I think you could learn to do anything you set your mind to, Rebecca said. But first, let's master these cattle calculations. As they returned to their work, Rebecca felt the same sense of continuity and purpose that had sustained her for over 2 decades. Outside, she could hear the voices of children playing in the yard, the sound of ranch hands working with the horses, and Martha calling everyone in for supper. Samuel and Martha were both in their 70s now, still active but beginning to slow down. Soon, the full responsibility for the ranch and its mission would fall to Rebecca and James, but she wasn't worried. They had built something strong enough to last, something that would continue to offer hope and opportunity to children who needed both. The girl who had been sold at a labor auction in Galveston had become the woman who ensured that no child in her care would ever face such a fate. It was, she reflected, a pretty good life's work. As the sun set over the Texas hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Rebecca closed the ledger and prepared to join her family for dinner. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new children to help, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, there was just the warmth of home, the comfort of family, and the satisfaction of knowing that love chosen and given freely could indeed change everything.